Hey guys, I'm Rachel and welcome back to Auxhart Gardening. So this past week I was out of town and so we skipped our garden tour. And I don't necessarily want to announce when I'm going out of town, which is why this was an unannounced skip of videos. I had hoped to have something recorded for you before I left, but the cards just did not play out for that. However, since I've been back, it has been raining consistently. And so a fresh garden tour this week, if I want it to be on time, is probably not going to happen. So I thought that it might be really fun, instead of a garden tour, for me to go back through my first garden tour here and react to it. All right, so I've got week one pulled up. Let's see what we got. Wow, everything was so empty. Hey guys, my name is Rachel and welcome back to Auxhart Gardening. Today is going to be the first garden tour at the new place. And so today is actually going to be a little more exciting because I've actually been away all weekend and I haven't even seen the garden for myself in a few days. And I kind of wanted to go through it with you guys so that we can react together to the growth, because it's been, I think, 2.5 days since I've looked at it, and we've had a little bit of rain, and when I left, a lot of things had just barely sprouted. And when they're right here at the beginning of their growth, they're going to grow really fast. So we're going to see a lot of changes. And so starting today and every week through the growing season, I'm hoping to give you guys a weekly garden tour so that you can follow along with the growth. This is also a little different this year than last year with the garden tours because I put in the garden really late this year. It is the beginning of June now, and I just put the garden in on like May 28th or something like that, which is very late for me. I'm here in zone 7B, South Carolina. I'm in the upstate, and usually I would have had my garden in by about mid-April. With the tomatoes, I would have waited until May for the peppers, but I am at least a month, if not a month and a half behind on a lot of the summer stuff. So it's going to be really interesting to show you guys how the garden is progressing, even though it's a little late this year. And just kind of glancing at it, I'm thinking that we're going to see a lot of good growth. So without further ado, let's start looking at the garden. So with this, I was so worried about putting in the garden as late as I did. And if you've been following the garden tours at all, you probably know that this was a really unfounded fear. And the amount of growth that I've seen this year has been beyond my wildest expectations. But let's just see where we started. This would be, so if this was in May, this is September 21st. So let's see, June, July, August, September. We're almost exactly 4 months out from this video. I want to start out by showing you guys the first bit of garden that I planted here. I planted this about a week before everything else. And as you can see, I've kind of just dug out the area where I wanted to plant stuff, to be honest, and then put the stuff right there without tilling, without destroying the rest of the ecosystem that was already existing around these plants. And so each little section is approximately the same. I have here a squash plant in the middle, and then there's a bean plant. You can see there's little baby marigolds coming up, and I also have little baby nasturtiums. And can we talk about how cute baby nasturtiums are? They're like little lily pads coming out of the ground. So all along this row I have approximately the same setup with different squashes. Can't remember exactly which ones are which, but I definitely have some pumpkins, some butternut, there's a spaghetti squash in here somewhere, and I know for sure that this one at the very end is a zucchini. So this one's going to be more of a bushing variety, and the
I
rest
did
of them
actually get some
are
fruit
going to be more
off
vining
of this particular
variety
plant.
squash.
This is the only one.
This one actually, I think, has the biggest nasturtium. And so a lot of the reason that I've planted stuff this way is an experiment. I want to see what happens when you plant stuff right into the existing ecosystem instead of like this other garden that I have, tilling the whole thing up and essentially killing everything that's there and then trying to rebuild from scratch. So we'll see how this goes.
So yeah, this area did not do so well. The biggest reason being that the grass in the area was already super well established, and it was hard to keep it from crowding out everything else. And so there was so much competition for nutrients that all of these plants that I planted just didn't really have a chance to grow big and strong. And so they got choked out when the grass around them got high because I wasn't able to keep it cut. And the whole thing was just not so great. I did get a zucchini off of that one plant, but I think that's the only thing that I got out of this entire section.
Got some stuff that's like pretty close together. I mean, you see my squash in the middle and the beans. And the reason for the beans is that they're going to fix nitrogen into the soil, and I'm hoping that they'll be good little companion plants for my squashes. But especially with this bushing variety here, there's a good chance that he's going to end up shading out all the stuff that is next to him. And I understand that, and I'm trying anyway because I want to see what happens. So here,
yeah, so even though this failed, I'm not sad that I tried because now I know and I've seen what happens for myself. And I think that that's cool.
Here is the main garden. If you want to see how I built this and some of my reasoning behind what I did, go back and watch my previous video where I explain all the way from tilling to planting this garden, brand new. All of it was yard, just like this, that we tilled up, and I built this garden. So let's come in and let me explain to you what I've got here. So there's a sidewalk here, and then there's this section right in front of the stairs.
That's where the path is now.
Not my house, but soon to be my house when it's done being remodeled. And so this section right here, I have planted crimson clover. And this section is really just going to be kind of cultivated into a pathway down to
I'm gonna have to try that
sidewalk.
Again.
And there was also, if you can see up here, some erosion going on from water. And I'm working on ways to kind of mitigate that erosion with building the path here. It's going to be a little difficult to get stuff rooted in it fast enough, but I do have some ideas for that, and that'll be
that actually ended up taking care of itself.
But basically this front section here is just going to be clover, and you can see little sprouts coming up in the mulch. Okay, and then we back up. We're going to start on the right side here. So I have this cattle panel trellis, and on this trellis I have tomatoes going down. And right at the front I have a cute little purple basil.
This basil plant got so big.
A marigold. There, I planted some marigolds from seed and some I bought at the store. We'll see which ones from seed actually come up.
A lot of them came up. It just took them a while.
I have Amish paste tomatoes, and then the second row there is San Marzano Lungo number 2 tomatoes. And all of these are paste tomatoes. And the plan here is to attach them to this trellis and prune them to 1 or 2 single stems as they grow up. Now on the other side of the tomatoes, I have the edge of the garden right here. And right here in the edge, I have planted sunflowers. These guys are getting their first true leaves. Oh, they're so much bigger than when I left.
I just pulled these sunflowers,
so these
the big
are
dead stalks out of the garden before I left for my trip.
And then also the back edge of the garden there is going to be sunflowers, and those hopefully are going to be a larger variety of sunflower, although I'm not entirely sure how big they're going to get. So you can see all the way are these sunflowers. And then there's actually this weird gap here. I thought I had planted sunflowers all along here, but they start sprouting
because the deer coming in to eat everything.
We'll get that closer
replanted those sunflowers a couple of times.
My tomatoes, I have all of my peppers. There's mostly sweet peppers here, and then we had a little bit of spillover sweet peppers into this area here, which was
I think
mainly
the spacing on these peppers was actually okay.
If you're just looking in the stores, you can tell hot pepper versus sweet pepper by the color of the tag. These white and yellow tags are the sweet, and the pink tags
plants
over there
grew so much. There's no reading those tags.
Spicy peppers.
Really, what I should have done.
Varieties here.
Really, what I should have done is made drawn a picture and then labeled everything on the picture where it was, so that I could go back and look, because actually reading the tags in the garden has become basically impossible. Either they faded, even though I used a UV resistant Sharpie, or they're just not findable at the base of the plant. So my recommendation to myself and to you is to draw it out and label everything on a piece of paper that you can bring with you and look and figure out which plant is which that way.
I can go through them. We have Criolla, de Cochina.
I'm gonna skip through
this is a variety from
all of these different varieties. Let's see. Oh, flavors.
So if we follow back along, you see here's where the tomatoes were. Next to the tomatoes, we have
eggplant.
My row of eggplant.
The spacing on the eggplant also,
first year
I think, is
growing
perfect
eggplant, and so far seems so good. I have two varieties. I'll have to look at the tags to remember which ones. This is Nagasaki Long, and my other variety is Antigua. I picked these two varieties because they're smaller eggplants, and
both of these varieties turned out
eggplants
really well
when I had them from my crop share.
I think the Nagasaki Long was a little more productive.
Varieties because I like to cut them up and not have to peel the skins off, and I think they're just overall more tender than those regular large eggplants. So on the next row over from the eggplants, I have planted an entire row of bush beans. I have two different varieties in here. The front section is the bush lake bean, and the back section is the purple teepee.
This was so many.
And both
way
of these
too many.
I have grown before, but not nearly in this quantity.
Yeah.
I have so many beans here, and hopefully I will have more bush beans than I know what to do with. Oh man.
Wow, I hoped for that.
I must have gotten a little off in my planting, because this row definitely curves, doesn't it? Oh well. That's what happens. But overall, these look good. I think most of them have come up. They're supposed to be in a row of 3, row of 2, row of 3 kind of
The spacing
pattern.
on these plants, though, I will say, was also good. This was a good spacing for bush beans.
And if that wasn't enough
I just
beans,
planted way too many.
I have on this trellis noodle beans. These are going to be Chinese red noodle beans. I grew them last year, and they were gorgeous, and I can't wait to have more of them. It looks like pretty much all of them have sprouted.
These are still producing.
I may have overestimated how many plants can fit on this trellis.
I think this was actually okay. I think this turned out fine.
It's all a big experiment
with the spacing
at the end, and we'll get some food no matter what. The second arched trellis, I have here cucumbers, and I planted 4 plants on this side.
Cucumbers also did really well.
And 4 plants on
but
this
I think
side.
I could have gotten away with
Put
3 on each side.
In each hole.
4 was a little much.
For germination reasons, so these will be thinned out. But so far so good with the cucumbers. And I had more tomatoes than could fit on my first trellis.
This is the section that I should have trellised from day one, and I did not.
These are the same varieties, and they will need support at some point. And I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do about that, because the clay down here would make it really high effort to give each of them their own post like I have done in the past.
Yeah, so my plan for this, for next year, is to take that panel, that cattle panel trellis, and I am going to extend it so that it goes the full length of the garden and just have all of that be tomatoes. I don't think I need any more tomatoes than that, because like the amount of tomatoes that I got just from that trellis was pretty good. I could probably do a little bit more if I want to do larger batches of tomato sauce. So if I just extend that trellis for the whole length of the garden, I think that that will be good enough, and that trellis system worked out really, really well for my tomatoes. So I do really highly recommend that. I do not recommend doing what I did here, which is winging it and waiting too long to do anything.
With my last garden. And I don't have really the room to put in more cattle panels here. So we're gonna have to find something kind of in between for these guys. Now if we come back to the back here, you can see my second row of sunflowers sprouting. Oh, they look so good. I can't wait to see these sunflowers grow up. My reasoning with putting them on the edges of the garden is sort of a natural fence, kind of keep some deer from wandering.
Did eventually happen,
and
but
kind of protect
it took a while.
The garden. Now this side is going to be squashes, and it looks like they have just now started to sprout.
So some of these are the pumpkins that took over.
This is going to be some more of
it looks like if I planted all bushing squashes, I would have had plenty of room.
And zucchini.
But because I planted vining,
what I've done is I've
they
alternated
just took over everything.
A winter squash and a summer squash, and a winter squash and a summer squash, because the summer squash are going to be spent way before the winter squash are done. So hopefully I'll be able to pull them out and give the winter squash some more room to grow up.
And that was the plan. And that plan probably would have worked okay if I hadn't dealt with so many pests. I had the vine borers, which I dealt with for the first time this year, and then I had the squash bugs, which just killed everything off later in the season. And so I did eventually get 3 pumpkins from this whole row. I got some zucchinis too, but the zucchinis got wiped out pretty quickly by the vine borers. But some of the vining pumpkin plants survived because they were vining and they were able to put down more roots. But yeah, I got 3 pumpkins total, which is okay. It probably would have been better if I had maybe pruned back some of the vines, first of all, that took over the garden, and made sure that they were going in all the right directions. And it probably also would have gone better if I had been able to stay on top of the squash bugs. So I've got to come up with some new strategies for that for next year.
Near the end of the season. Oh, and you can see on the outer edge here, my little marigolds are sprouting.
Those marigolds did pretty well.
What happened the day that everything got planted?
They got really tall.
We had some rain, and a few of my seed packets actually just got wet. And it was either plant them now or let them go to waste. And so there's actually going to be a lot more marigolds around here than I had originally planned
I never
for.
thinned these out. I just let them do whatever.
You know, it's not going to be a bad thing, I don't think. We're going to have lots of flowers. Oh, and I forgot to tell you guys about the zinnias. So right in here, in between my arched trellises,
the zinnias were a great idea.
Put in zinnias.
They added so much beauty to the garden and attracted so many butterflies.
In between these trellises. And they're also scattered kind of throughout the garden because that was another set of seeds that got wet. So there's going to be a lot of zinnias around, and hopefully they're pretty and they add to the garden. And anything that I don't need that's getting in the way, I won't feel bad about pulling out. So this is...
Won't feel bad about pulling out. Well, I didn't do that, actually. I did feel bad, and I did not pull them out. And I'm not sorry. I am more sorry that I didn't more thoughtfully plant where they were going to be, but the amount of zinnias I had was gorgeous, and I will definitely be doing some more of that.
It's really my first time planting a space this large. anything I do this year, don't take as this is what you should do, because I really don't know what I'm doing. I kind of tried to expand what I was doing to a larger space, but I just have this feeling that I'm not really utilizing the space to the best of my ability.
That's probably true.
You know, I got to the point while we were planting where I was like, oh, I have all this extra space. What else do I have that I can put in? So there wasn't a lot of forethought, and I wasn't really prepared for just how much space I have. And so definitely not using my space efficiently. And especially with stuff like the beans, I may have planted way more than I need. We'll see, because I'm really just feeding me and my boyfriend and sometimes his family. But I'm not feeding a big family, and this row of beans kind of looks like the sort of row of beans you would plant to feed a family. So I'm going to be learning a lot about preservation techniques as well. The big thing that I really wanted this year was the tomatoes and the peppers. And looking at the amount of sweet peppers that I have, I don't have any harvest from them yet, obviously, but I'm thinking that I could plant more sweet peppers and less other stuff as we...
The amount of sweet peppers I had is perfect. It's on a little on the high side, but I can probably figure out what to do with all of them. Hot peppers, definitely too many.
Go forward. But it's really just a big experiment. And
It is.
I hope you guys are gonna get a kick of watching me succeed or fail, whichever it may be, along the way. I'm actually thinking about adding another garden here. I know I just talked about how I already have more space than I know what to do with, but you'll notice that in this garden I haven't really planted any of my herbs or perennials, and that's something that I'm still kind of thinking about what it is I want to do.
Still haven't done that.
My initial thought was that I wanted to do a separate perennial section of garden somewhere else, and then I was watching videos on permaculture. I think specifically it was a video by Canadian Permaculture that I was watching, and he mentioned how beneficial it can be to plant perennials and annuals next to each other, so that when in the spring your perennials start coming up, they are immediate shade and protection for your soil, so that as you're planting in your annuals, they already kind of have that established ecosystem, they have that established protection, especially little baby seeds when they're coming up. And so I am now maybe rethinking what I'm going to do.
I'm still rethinking
There's
it.
the part of my
To be
brain
honest, I haven't.
that really wants
It's not
everything
done
to be
until it's
separate
done.
and neat, and the idea of planting perennials, especially some herbs like mint, that will take over.
Mint is gonna have to be
Probably gonna have to keep those contained somehow, somewhere, because they do really take over. But things like my oregano or my dill, all my basil, these things I can plant probably interspersed in this garden. But that means that year over year, that specific spot is going to be that plant. And there's not going to be as much flexibility in terms of moving stuff around. And that scares me a little bit, I guess.
Me.
But I don't know, maybe it would be a good thing to do. And maybe it would help make my soil healthier and my garden healthier. So those are things that I'm considering as I'm building more gardens. But again, I am not the expert. I'm just here experimenting on camera for the benefit of you guys. Alright, so now I'm going to take you over to
Oh wow, this area
the
looks
house
so
I'm
different.
actually living in, where
The grass
my container garden is.
Grew up around these
And
containers.
you'll see I have a very, very long hose that I'm currently using to water the big garden.
Oh, the hose. So after this, I don't think I really watered the garden at all. Like, I got everything damp enough to sprout. Everything sprouted. I didn't water. I have not had to use this hose all year. And I think that that is because I did such a good job mulching everything.
Because the water at the new house isn't turned on yet. But I still have a fair amount of stuff over here. So these 4 containers right here are potatoes.
Only one of those ever came up, and I just harvested from that, and it's like, I don't know, a small handful of potatoes. That's about it.
I put in potatoes about a week ago, so they probably shouldn't be up yet. Although if they're not up by next week, I might start worrying a little bit. They already had stuff growing out of the eyes of the potatoes, and I hadn't really planned on planting them, but since they were already growing, I figured I might as well try. These are
I got some food from them.
plants that still don't really have a home. I
These
have
plants
lavender
never
that
really
I got to
a
go in the
home,
perennial
if I'm being
garden.
honest.
I have my strawberry plant.
I left them
which some
alone
of
to
you have been
die
following
there,
me for a
except the
while.
strawberry. The strawberry I did hang up somewhere, but he also did not produce and died because I don't think I watered him enough.
I remember that I thought I killed my strawberry plant. It's never been a very healthy plant, and I entirely stopped taking
I think
care
I
of it
actually
because I
killed
thought
it
it was
this time,
dead.
though.
And
I
then
really
it just
do.
started growing back. So I think this strawberry deserves to live, and it deserves a permanent home somewhere. Just haven't figured out where yet. And I have a few more perennials here. I have marshmallow plants and chamomile that I'm planning on putting somewhere. We'll see. Over here, I have some of my other herbs. My cilantro went to seed, and I'm slowly collecting the seeds from it so that I can replant. Cilantro here in the south, it doesn't like the heat, so you really kind of have to grow it over the winter, which is unfortunate because cilantro goes so well with all the summer foods in
Yeah, I still haven't figured out what my solution for cilantro is, if I'm being honest.
salsa particularly. So I think this is going to have to be an indoor plant for me this summer. Next to it is my parsley. This is the parsley's second year, so it is going to seed as well. And I am going to try and save some seeds and replant. Normally in a perennial garden, I think that this would reseed itself, and I wouldn't really have to do too much with it. But since it's been in a container, it needs a little bit more attention. I also have here some basil. I have several varieties. This is an Emily
Basil went really
which is
well.
really just a different variety of a regular sweet basil. I have more hot pepper plants. I think that one's a Buena Mulata. I still have my onions.
Oh yeah, the onions.
Some of these you'll see are starting to...
All my onions this year ended up being like tiny. So I gotta figure out what I can do better this year, because I'm about to start thinking about onions for the fall. And I still don't know what I'm really doing with that.
bulb up. And I'm thinking I might get some decent sized onions from these itty bitty babies. I don't really know why they never got any bigger than this. But at least it's not an entire waste. I have in front of me here a stevia plant. This one is from seed this year. You'll see its brother that reseeded itself in a minute. This is the lavender plant that I'm trying to grow from seed. And I bought the other one
I don't know
because
what
this one
happened to the
seems
lavender
to be kind of
plant,
stuck
if
in
I'm
this
thinking
baby
about it.
stage.
I
I'm not sure
I
if
don't
it'll
remember
ever get
what
bigger.
happened to it.
Plant that's not having any trouble
think it
getting
died.
big is my dill. It is also going to seed, making these beautiful big flower heads. Let's see, so we have more basil, more hot peppers. Some of these I lost the tags to because I put them in the edge here and then they just fell down to
Pretty
the
much
bottom.
know what
And I'm not
all
really
of them are
willing to
now.
dig them out. So we'll see what they are when they make peppers. I have also, this is lemon basil. Lemon basil will not stop going to seed.
I didn't end up using very
I
much
don't
of the
know how
lemon
much
basil.
effort I can really put into keeping it.
It all just went
from
to
going to
seed,
seed.
so fast. I couldn't keep up with it.
Let's see. Okay, this one looks very similar, not the same. This is stevia. This is the one that regrew from I said reseeding earlier, but I think it regrew from its actual root ball.
Yeah.
And you can see it's
That
much
plant
farther
still
along
looks really great.
than the one that I planted from seed this same year. So this looks like this is going to be a really healthy perennial plant for me in this area. We have more peppers, more onions. These ones are also starting to bulb up. I have my beautiful variegated fish pepper plant. Although
This
I think
plant got
being out here in the
so
sun, the
pretty.
variegation
Oh
isn't
my
as pretty as
goodness.
it would be. We have more purple basil, more peppers, and kind of wanted to show you guys this interesting pepper here at the end. This one is the Tabasco pepper.
This
that I brought
Tabasco
inside
is
for the
producing
winter.
for me this
And
year.
probably you'll remember the last time you saw it, it was really tall and not looking so healthy. It was recommended to me that I cut it back, and I did. You can see some of the remnants maybe of the older stem, and obviously it liked that, and it has grown back in force. It is the biggest pepper plant that I currently have. Let's see, this is a chamomile. This is the same as those ones in the cups, but it got moved a couple weeks ago into this larger
Chamomile should
container,
have
so
gone
it's feeling a lot
in the
better.
ground, not in the container.
And then
It didn't do very well in the
adversity
container.
pepper that I saved over the winter. This one seems
This
like it
pepper
has
looks
never
sad
really
all
fully
year.
recovered.
It never.
Although it is trying to put on flowers, because I think it thinks it's dying, and it's like, oh man, better reproduce. I don't know if this pepper plant's ever really going to be healthy, but I'm just going to kind of let it do what it's going to do and continue to watch what happens with it. This one is different from the Tabasco because this one I brought in for the winter, but it was already in its container for its whole life. This one I dug out of the garden bed and put into a container, and it looked healthy enough for a while, but there was one point where it just started looking sick and never really got better. We'll see.
Yeah, never got better.
As always, that's what I always
did
say.
produce
We'll see what happens.
a whole pepper that I ate, and that was it.
Up here on my deck are the last few
and
of
these
my
all
herbs,
died.
and also my
They're all so dead right
microdwarf
now.
tomatoes. These are orange hat tomatoes. They don't get too big. They're a determinate variety, and they make these cute little, what will be soon,
These were
orange
really cute.
fruits.
I recommend
And
these.
this
If you
one
are
is
doing
getting
container
a little top heavy.
tomatoes,
I had to prop him up a little
these
bit.
orange hats are
It
perfect.
looks
Like
like I'm
this
gonna get
size
a lot of
container
good
was
fruit.
fine for them. You can go a little bigger, but
I
this
still
was
have
fine.
my thyme plant, my spearmint, my catnip, and my oregano. Again, this is in its second year, so it's going to seed. And I'm going to end the tour indoors because we cannot end a garden tour without checking out my single seed challenge.
Single seed challenge is
This
still doing
is
great.
my jigsaw pepper, my single seed challenge, my gorgeous purple variegated beauty. With the backlight, it's a little harder to tell. So if I get y'all around this angle, you can see.
Oh,
It's just
so
a
pretty.
beautiful.
Yeah. Single seed challenge is still doing great, by the way. Hasn't grown that much just because it's in this little tiny pot still. I never uppotted it, and that was the plan from the beginning, was to help keep it small. And it's still making peppers. More than I need, to be honest. It's really just a decorative plant on my counter at this point, but I think that that's okay. And this is pretty much the end of the tour. Big takeaways are that, like, I did a better job than I thought I would with this, but there are a lot of things that I've learned, and I think going into this next year, at least the next summer season, I still have the whole fall season to get through and learn some stuff, but I think that coming into the next summer season, I have a much better plan for what I'm going to do, and definitely going to distribute my production a little better. But yeah, that is all I have for you guys. I hope that you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane, and next week I hope to have an actual garden tour for you, as well as some other fun stuff that I'm working on. So until next time, I wish you guys happy gardening.